days you work, one whole day to play. Come on, everybody, wear your roller skates today. It's Saturday, 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 it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday,
Saturday with Renee.
Right, yes indeed. Welcome back everybody to Black Liberation Media and episode 125 of Uninterrupted Saturdays with Renee, featuring Renee Johnston. I'm Jared Ball. Please like, share, subscribe, support the Patreon, put something in the socials, let folks know you're here. Renee,
what up?
How you feeling this week?
Listen, we do this every time. I'm here. That's it. That's the car needs to go back in the shop. I just got a news report that we're about to get 18 inches of snow. I can't, this life's not for me, man. I should have been a capitalist. I could go live on an island and be by myself and not do stuff. I'm lying, y'all. I couldn't do that.
So peace to the undefeated all-stars. Good to see you all again. Samantha's in the chat. Chitty Matcha, Latif, yes indeed. Greetings, everyone. Leah Boggs in the building. So yeah, I don't know what we're getting winter warnings here as well, but I don't know.
I think it's supposed to be not so bad once you cross. What's the line? The Delaware line. What's that? Delaware, whatever.
The Mason-Dixon.
Is the Mason-Dixon that high up?
No, technically Maryland, I think, is split by it, something like that.
Okay.
But or just underneath it, but it's close. It might be close actually.
How's your life? How are the college visits going? How are the things?
I mean, it's nice that we have these choices, and baby girl has done, both of them have done really well to create choices, so they're going pretty well. We'll see. The issue is of course how we're gonna get through this without all the debt, and rightfully so, to be honest. I mean, we fall right in that category, as I keep complaining about, where as a household we earn enough not to get aid, but not enough to be able to pay for it out of pocket.
The way they calculate aid, and you know that they just switched up how they do the whole process for the FAFSA and the federal aid and all that stuff. Completely switched a year and a half ago for whatever bizarre reason that they decided to go to a different scale for how they do the debt. The whole thing is totally out of control. I was looking at tuitions the other day and I'm just not here for it. I don't want to do it. I got 3 years before we even have to, be dealing with all this stuff. But that's not long enough. 3 years is not enough time to mentally prepare myself for the disaster that is going to be this college process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess, and then what you end up getting for it at the end is another part of the mess. Right. Or what you don't get for it in the end is part of the mess. So, I don't know, and then both of our daughters want some version of medical school as well. So, yeah, I don't know. So everybody like, share, subscribe. Support the Patreon. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because
man, listen.
And on paper, I mean, I get it. Like I said, there's really no room for us to complain. It's just that they've made the cost of this outrageous.
Outrageous. It is outrageous.
Yeah. But we'll see, but fortunately we have shows like this where we can distract ourselves by real problems in the world.
Listen,
And
listen, I remind myself all the time
I
that
just heard from our mechanic this morning too.
Look, all the shit I complain about is first world problems. It's all first.
Yeah, somebody was like, because I started reposting my Academics and Cars series, which was a lot of fun. And somebody was like, you need to start doing them again. And I was like, I don't have a car for that anymore. Like, first of all, like my car can't handle that anymore. We could sit still in the car and just say we could put up a green screen and be like we're in the movies and put like we in the moving car, but
we in parked cars, academics in parked cars,
academics in green screen vehicles, because that car has, it put in a shift, you know what I'm saying? But between me and now two children, I don't know, so parking lot politics. Exactly.
I do like that though. Parking lot politics. I do like that. That's got a nice little ring to it.
That got a nice little ring. I did get hit up. We're going to start a new series. I heard so while I was visiting the school last week, and this will be it for me, and we can move on. I did hear from two legends, and for a nice reason too. Skip Kuhn and Tafari, brother Tafari, were off doing great work in the world and ran into somebody, and my name came up in a positive way, and they just wanted to let me know. So I appreciated that. That was sweet. And but in the conversation, we were talking about how, just whatever, and pedestrian professors. Exactly. And we came up with what will be a new interview segment at some point for me, and they will be the first guests, and it's going to be called The Ballroom.
Ah, all right, all right.
Get it?
I get it.
So stay tuned, everybody, for more on The Ballroom. Now that my name is up there, it'll make more sense in case there's some folks as slow as me out in the chat.
Still trying to figure it out.
As long as it took me to get Franny French for weapons of mass transit. Exactly. I was sitting there for months. TWOFs.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I don't really have a...
The Ballroom. I'm trying to tell you.
I do like that though.
Jokes. I like it too. I like it too.
I like it.
So
all right.
Anyway.
So before we end today, remind me to share the link for our Malcolm X talk that I've roped you into.
Without difficulty, I'm happy to do it. Honored to do it. And that is true. That today, let me just do this quick calculation, because I don't want to pretend like I'm doing this off the top of my head. Is the 61st anniversary. I should remember, because last year was the 61st anniversary of Malcolm's assassination today. So please check all the work on this platform and elsewhere around the 100 Years of Malcolm X series. Revisit all of that, share all of that, and then what's happening tonight?
Yeah, so we're going to be, and I'll find the link at some point. We can drop it in the chat. But I Jared into sitting on a Zoom with me for the Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus of the Green Party, so we can discuss how Malcolm's words live on. And I've been listening to speeches because I found an audio book that is just a collection of his speeches. Like, it's literally just the recordings of his speeches. And it includes like interviews that he did with like panels. It's a very interesting like collection of things. But I think sometimes even I forget like how like on it he was. like you listen to it and you're like, he could have wrote this shit yesterday. Like literally, he could have wrote this shit yesterday. It would still reign 100% true the way it reigned 100% true then. So, so we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. I always enjoy walking down the path of the lessons we didn't learn and how do we continue to teach these lessons. And I did try to get Todd with you because I feel like the two of you together is always fun, but Todd was working. So
Todd sometimes be on his, and so tomorrow, by the way, I am doing a live stream tomorrow, and I'll be reading.
I did see the note.
Well, I'll be reading starting the show by reading his letter of thanks for the birthday live that we did. Yeah, TSB.
Mm-hmm.
And we raised for him, I don't know exactly yet, but it'll be approaching at least $400, which is pretty cool. And he has a thank you letter that he's asked me to read. So we'll start off with that tomorrow.
Classic
but he's
Todd.
On some. Todd is a diva. See, that's the other thing people don't know. Todd is a diva. So, but yes, I love this manifesto. The ballroom is down the street from Ray's Boom Boom Room. And that's a great reference. Salute to that, because Ray's Boom Boom Room absolutely is legendary. So that's right. The ballroom is right down the street from Ray's. And so you can just have a whole night of politics and debaucherous fun all in one time. So right on.
Oof. Well, I guess, I mean, I feel like, as much as I can chat to you all day, I feel like the guest has way more, good information. And I'm really excited. And just so y'all know, I've been trying to leave Essam alone because he was also finishing up his dissertation, future doctor. And so I wanted to make sure that I let him do that first and not be like harassing people while they're trying to write dissertations. And just so people know, this is why Mahi has not been back on yet, because she is also finishing up her dissertation. So I hit her the other day, like, all right, I'll circle back in a few weeks. You know how that's going. So we can, I think Essam's ready.
Yes,
and then
we won't ask the dreaded question of how that dissertation is going, but welcome back to the platform.
Thank you so much, and good morning. It's good to be joining you in the same time zone this time, not like a year and 3 months ago, so 4 months ago when I was late at night. So so now as some people call it Turtle Island, or officially the United States. So, good morning.
Good to see you, Issa. Good to see you. Why don't we start with our general, this is your second time of many, I hope, back, but we, for folks who are unfamiliar, if you want to introduce yourself and tell the folks who you are, where you're at, what you do, all the good stuff, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so my name is Essam Elkorghli. It's an Arabic name, so the letter A doesn't exist in English, so a lot of people just call me Essam, so that's okay. I'm from Libya, and this is my 12th year in the United States, where I did my undergrad, master's, and now finishing up the PhD. So labor organizer at the same time as Pan-Africanist, because Libya is part of Africa, despite what U.S. State Department, actually, funny enough, if you register for U.S. State Department newsletters, in order to get the emails about Northern Africa, you have to sign up for the Middle East newsletter. So they're trying to divorce Arab countries from the rest of Africa, which is working, right? The de-Africanization of Northern Africa to disassociate us from the same historical struggles against imperialism. Tangentially, that's not part of my bio, but it just tells you a little bit about being part of my identity where I am. So, and I'm in Illinois currently. You can definitely ask me any questions about the dissertation because it's done and written, and the defense should be next month sometime. So I'll be happy to speak about that too.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And yeah, and I'm very good friends with Renee. We have been in the same global Pan-African movement together for quite some years. We miss you in our meetings, but hopefully we'll see you soon, Renee. Yeah, and I write frequently for Black Agenda Report, which is a friend of the show, but also most recently with Bambazuka News, which is a Pan-African outlet that had a hiatus of 5 years, but now it's back up online. So yeah, and I just came from kind of a seminar from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. my time about Michael Parenti, who's a fantastic anti-imperialist American scholar who passed away a month ago, exactly on the 24th. And so, yeah, so there's, so I'm a bit emotional after hearing everybody's testimonies about who Michael Parenti was. But yeah, I'm ready to start whenever you guys are. So thank you for having me again. It's good to be here.
Thank you. All right, so some folks in the chat are saying that your sound seems to be coming through your computer and not your headset. So maybe
I changed it. Thank you so much.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Much better. Okay.
Much better. And I could hear you, but I know that echo feeling when folks are trying to listen. So since you offered, I think we should start with your dissertation, because that is one of those things that in my brain I feel like I could do, but at the same time I've actual desire to do it because I watch other people do it and I'm like, y'all all wildin'. So how about we start with that and you can talk to folks about, I know we talked about it a little bit because you were like in the midst of it the last time you came on. You were still, working and doing some of the research. So why don't we talk about what your dissertation is about and maybe tell the folks like why you chose that focus specifically.
Here's one quick thing. I think PhDs and dissertations, it's about resilience and how much one has stamina to do something, but it's not something difficult. And I compare it to Libya, where PhDs are much more difficult because professors, they are harsher with grading, harsher with feedback. And it's not because we're just harsher people, just the culture of academia is different than it seems like here, especially in social sciences. The hardest part has been for me to write this dissertation, which is titled The Geopolitics of Textbooks in Contemporary Libya, so I'm an education person, has been the distractions that I get. And the distractions are good distractions. They tend to be political organizing, they tend to be being a subject of history as opposed to being an object of history, that things evolve around you and you should act and you should stop doing academic stuff and do more political. And so that has been the largest distraction, the most difficult part, balancing both. Which tells you also about the compartmentalization of academia. They try to make you an academic, which is disassociated from reality. So your intellectual work is different from your political work. There's no cohesion, all right? So, which is a strategy for the division also of the working class people. So the dissertation looks at textbooks in Libya. So historically, Libya was a socialist country, and then 2011, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, came, bombed it, and then just like if you look at history, whenever there's an upheaval in a society, the textbooks or how the state or the new people in power, they revisit the education system to address the history from their point of view. And so the textbooks were, shifted drastically. So I don't look at this normative sense of textual analysis where you get a textbook and you read it, like, oh, look who's writing, the author, who's included. When they talk about Libya, when they say we, what do they mean by this we? Who does it include? Who does it exclude? I mean, those are discursive practices that are just are not political economy larger, right? So funny enough, the dissertation is largely not about the text itself, but it's about how does the text get produced and physically in the textbook. So when you look at Marx, people who follow Marxism and so forth, they tend to follow historical materialism, which means that ideas, they're connected to material reality. So the forces in Libya, those who are in charge, they have a stake in what's being written. So again, power, right? And so when it's written, you notice that much of the textbooks, they don't write anything about Libya's history from 1969 to the present. And then they speak positively about the Ottoman Empire and Ottoman history and Turkey and so forth. And they are largely pro-West, such that even in World War II, there's no mention of the sacrifices of the Soviet Union and what they did to defeat Nazism and fascism in Europe, at least temporarily, right? They did that in up to 1945, because we know that fascism still exists in Europe. So all of that. So I decided to interview people, the authors themselves, and I realized that the CIA has infiltrated the authoring of the civic education textbooks, that the Turkish intelligence, Turkey, right, the country, they have intervened into Libya's authoring of the textbooks. And so and then also Turkey prints the textbooks themselves. So because Libya has been deindustrialized and destroyed, which is something that we could talk about in this episode, they have also printed textbooks because Libya lost its productive capacity because of the destruction that took place in 2011 up to the present, right? So yeah, and then eventually I look at it from this current moment where the US itself is trying to exert influence there's in 2019 an act called the Global Fragility Act. And when the empire says that the world is fragile, that means they are not in control anymore. And so the act literally says that Libya is one of the target countries, and then they started pumping so much money into Libya, doing what is commonly called cognitive warfare, and that relies on investigative journalists and relies on people who write the textbooks to do things in favor of US imperialism. And so I analyze all of that and put it in this kind of, what I think is cohesive, but maybe some people don't think so, the dissertation. So that's broadly what it is.
Thank you. Someone in the chat, by the way, Leah remembers the first time you were here and says, I remember when Essam described his dissertation the first time, it was blown away. I agree. And I am fascinated by how the written history is used against, completely against any attempt to liberation. Like if thinking about how the history books will change and adjust to make sure that people are most moved away from anything that actually wants you to have a political struggle. And it's wildly like, at this point, I'm no longer surprised by it when I hear about it. When I hear things like, oh, they're changing the textbooks, I'm like, well, this is what they do, right? Like the textbooks that are printed in the last like 3 or 4 years, nothing like the textbooks that were printed 50, 60 years ago, which were already shitty textbooks. So it's not like, it just get worse. Like it's amazing to me. But I'm curious, as you were doing this research, is there anything that you learned that you were truly like what? Like they did that? Like what on earth? Did anything surprise you as you were like doing this research study to discover how absolutely like viciously evil sometimes these systems are?
Okay, so yeah, there is actually a funny story. So Libya's archives from 1969 to the present, so archival documents and so forth, are classified. That means nobody can access them. So part of the dissertation is a history of education. Like I looked at the letters from the Ministry of Education from the independence, 1951 to up to 1969. So I could just see what they're talking about in terms of ideology, textbooks, whatever. But then so I was like, what do I do with this phase from 1969 up to the present? So I know that Libya had close relationship with Yugoslavia, another country that was bombed by NATO, because Tito, who was the former president of Yugoslavia, died in 1980, was close with a lot of global South countries, and actually was the only European country that supported liberation movements in Africa and Asia and so forth. Even famously, Gaddafi said in 1969, a couple of weeks after he took power, he said, Yugoslavia is the only light place in the darkness of Europe. So I decided to go to Serbia, and luckily enough, Serbia allows Libyans to enter if they have a US visa. So I had a US visa, I entered Serbia. I got to the archives there, and then, they kick you out. after 2 p.m. And so I was like, okay, what do I do in my afternoon? So I was like, I'll just stroll the streets like a tourist who's lost, right? And so I was looking at this old mausoleum, or like the kind of place where a key figure passes away. They build it for them. And it's of Ali Pasha. So it has been built hundreds of years ago when Serbia or Yugoslavia was under the people called occupation, rule, depends on your political orientation, and analysis of the Ottoman. So Yugoslavia was under the Ottomans, so Europe, right? And then on it, it has a sign, and it's written in Serbian and in Turkish. Obviously, I could pull out my phone and Google Translate it, but the tourists, they like to also be academic tourists. They like to probe people around. And funny enough, I saw 3 people passing by. They looked like fellow brown people. I did the usual racial stereotyping. They looked like my part of the world people, but I heard them there speaking Turkish in Serbia, right? So I asked them, hey, excuse me, do you speak Turkish? They said, yes. So I asked them, what does this translate to? And they said that this is TICA, which is kind of, I think, of USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development. There's a Turkish one. And then TICA says this is a collaboration between the Ministry of Tourism and Culture of Serbia and then TICA to rehabilitate Ottoman historic sites in former Yugoslavia. So I was like, oh, interesting, who's running it? So he pulls out this picture and then he says, this person, he Googled it and showed me the picture. So I took a picture of his phone after his permission. And then I looked, when I went home, I started researching who's this guy. So he is, very interestingly, the director of TICA, which is the Turkish version of USAID, he is the person that was stationed in NATO. So he worked with NATO intelligence. And then he moved to study soft power, which is the idea of human diplomacy, sending money to people, propaganda, and so forth, so people have good relations with another country. And then he became the head of Turkish intelligence in Turkey. He then served the head of the TICA, and now he's the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey. His name Hakan Fidan. So then there's this connection. What does this TICA has to do with my textbook production, right? Funny enough, a couple of months when I was looking at this TICA thing, I realized that they have had multiple events where they have hosted the curriculum center in Libya. They did some events together. So TICA in Serbia, TICA in Libya, TICA with the curriculum center in Libya. So, and then I was like, wait, hold on. What is this connection? I was trying to look at the textbooks, reading them again, and I flipped them and I see in the cover in the back, it says printed in Turkey. And so I'm like, why are these printed in Turkey? So then I met with an interview the person from the curriculum center, and I asked about this whole process of like, how do you decide who prints the textbooks physically, right? And funny enough, he says, well, you know, we give it to the private sector and they deal with it. They give them a contract and they deal with it. I was like, but what if the private sector outsources it? Isn't that illegal? He's like, yeah, but you know, we're in a state of like chaos. The state is not functional in Libya and so forth. So I'm like, okay, so now TICA is printing Libya's textbooks. So what's the connection ideologically? Is there something related to the content? So when you analyze the content, you realize that there's a large influence of Turkish, you know, speaking positively about the Ottoman history. And so, again, funny enough, in Libya, I was in a funeral of a friend of mine's grandmother who passed away, and I see a friend that I haven't seen in 15 years. And I was like, oh, my friend, good to see you. What's up, what's up? He is a translator of the Turkish embassy. He's Libyan, but he works as a translator for the Turkish embassy in Libya. And he connects me with the people from TICA in Libya, and I get to interview them, and I make all this connection. So you see the connection now from walking in the streets of Serbia, seeing that old mausoleum, probing this, racially profiling this Turkish tourists as well, and then asking them about this TICA. And then I go back to Libya and then research it more, and I realize that there's this connection and so forth. So yeah, so that was just very eye-opening. And there's a couple of other stories, but I think this one suffices for now. Sorry for it's been took me away.
No, these are the things, you know, those links when you threads, and it's like you see the tiny thread and you start pulling at it, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, like how did this all happen this way? But I can promise you, and chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can promise you that there's probably no one who had any idea that the textbooks in Libya would be printed in Turkey by some group that was led by somebody who was working for the US. I can't, like, you can't even make that stuff up. Like, if you wrote that in a novel, people would think that you made that up and that it was all make believe, right? Like, because people don't understand how these things are, like how they are all connected behind the scenes, and how every time you look at this larger picture of imperialism and empire and colonialism and like all these things, it's always at the core the same network of people and governments and just things working behind the scenes to ensure that we're always being told exactly the thing that they want us to know, right? So if you want to know anything beyond whatever is presented by the mainstream, by the government, by even, this is why you can't even believe whenever they say, well, the police report said that, like, it's always a confiscation of like what actually is happening and the thing that they actually don't want you to know about, right? It's fascinating to me, fascinating. So I appreciate taking that little walk with you.
Yeah, no, and I wish, to interject this just a side thing, but there's this amazing book that just came out 2 months ago. It's called Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism?
It's literally in my bag, literally in my bag.
And he does exactly, when I read the book, so I finished my dissertation and then I read the book and I was like, did you just copy my dissertation, but just applied it on the intellectual Cold War, right? And so I felt like Gabriel Rockhill, the author of the book, did exactly that, to understand sometimes when you read texts and then you ask the question, why is this person who's supposedly from the same political orientation that I am, or we have the same animosity towards injustice, but then they are writing things that are in favor of the system. So he does this great historical materialist analysis of the Frankfurt School, the historians and the Marxists, and who were fled Nazi Germany, and they were supposedly Marxists, but they were pro-imperialist Marxists. They were against communism. They were against any socialist system. They were Zionists themselves. It's surprisingly, right? To be people who are critical of power and so forth, but then they were pro-U.S. imperialism. So yeah, the way that how he traced these things, it just was very eye-opening to see. It's not just Libya. It's like, I'm sure that every country has this trajectory of power, or as one of your guests wrote in the chat, as it's kind of like a spider web of influences. So,
yeah. And it's fine. I wondered if you had read that book when after I read your latest article from Black Agenda Report, because you mentioned something about like within the text of the article, you say the words Western Marxism, and I immediately thought, did he read this book?
Yeah.
So
I did. Yes.
I should have known. I just started it, so I can't say too much about but I am very much like in the works trying to figure out some massive conversation between all of these parties that because my big thing is breaking the propaganda, right? Like, how do we get people to understand how these things are working behind the scenes to make us think that this is what's happening when a totally different thing is actually happening that we've been misdirected from. And so I'll be sure to let you know when when all of my scheming comes to an end point and I know what in the heck we're gonna do. I'll be sure to ping you in, because I'm fascinated by the thought that his book is a version of what you did in your dissertation, and so.
Or my dissertation,
or your
version, but he is way advanced.
However we want to put it, but great minds and brilliance for me is really all, that's where things are at. Jared, I get to talking. So did you have any questions about the dissertation or anything?
No, I just want to read it at some point, and then maybe we could talk more about have another interview or discussion about that specifically. But I find all of that fascinating, and you know, in one way or another, often considering the weaponized nature of textbooks and narratives and what become the dominant themes, and then people, you know, and I also was thinking as you were talking that this is something I often think is connected to what is dismissed as entertainment, that people often, we are encouraged at least to dismiss things as you know, it's just a movie, it's just a textbook, what's the big deal, like what would the politics be in establishing narratives nationally for a whole country's youth to grow up on, et cetera and so forth. But yeah. And again, folks, I do encourage you, please check out Mtume Gant's Patreon and his discussion with Gabriel Rockhill. I've heard a number with Rockhill, and I think that one is particularly interesting. But yeah.
So
and salute to his criticism of the Frankfurt School, which was as far left as we were allowed to get in my grad experience.
So I brought up the Black Agenda report. I dropped the link in the chat just so I'm having a fight with Google right now, people, and I hope this doesn't get me in trouble on these Google streets that we're sitting on right now. But they're like flagging my spreadsheet, my run sheet for the show. And so I don't want to use it anymore. And I moved us to another platform that Dwayne Monroe has assured me is better. Anyway, but I have to do the whole like making sure it is what it is. So poor Jared's running without a run sheet this week. And so
no, I got it. I'm caught up. I found, I followed it. I got it.
Okay.
We're good.
All right. So this is Essam's most recent article. And as you talk more about your dissertation, I'm like, oh, well, you clearly wrote this with your dissertation in mind, which I'm all for. But it's also a very interesting, this conversation about how the US Zionism, this constant, like, we're going to pull the group that the people have chosen, or we're going to create chaos in a place where the leadership is that the people have chosen. We're going to say we're installing democracy, but we're really going to put in the person that we want to be in there so that we can continue to create chaos while we steal all the resources. I feel like this is like, the typical how these things all work. And one of the reasons that I really wanted you to come back, Essam, is with all of these things that have been happening as you start looking at the attempts for Israel to spread a little bit more, right? They're building walls in Lebanon now, and they're dropping bombs everywhere. When you look at the removal and the installing of a new president in Syria, you see the murder of Gaddafi in Libya, like there are all these things and they're all connected, right? And you are like one of my go-to folks whenever I think about these things. I always read your articles and, I don't ask you too many questions because you've been writing, but now that you're done, you're going to probably get more questions from me. But I wanted to start with this article specifically because you're looking at Syria now after having predicted what was going to happen a year ago in Syria. So Jared, I don't know if you want to scroll first about the article and then we can let Essam or if you want to do it a different way, whatever.
No, I mean, I'm happy to have Essam just break it down for us. There were a couple of, it's a very important article, and I'll make sure it's in the show description. Encourage people to check it out. But I admit I was drawn to the point that you're making in the article, and then I'll let you take over from here. about the I was drawn particularly to your focus or reference to the attack on ideas of what de-Baathification means, and beyond just the specific forms of attack and the violence, et cetera, and so forth, but that there's just there is a worldview being attacked here that you draw out involves Pan-Africanism and an approach to solidarity that we're not encouraged to.
I think ideas are not just ideas, they're always attached to a material reality, right? So this is one of the things that the late Michael Parenti has always repeated, is that when we think of things, it's not just floating ideas, the free flow of the free market of flowing ideas, they are always related to materialism somehow, right? And I think this is our duty to analyze how they're connected, be it the production of ideas, the circulation, or even the interpolation, as Althusser would call it, the absorption of the ideas in their embodiment. It's not being a prophetic or anything, but I think when you read history and you see the same process happening everywhere in imperialist intervention, intervene in Afghanistan, they write textbooks, intervene in Nicaragua and try to coup legislatively through elections, right? And Sandinista movement, they changed the textbooks. Iraq changed textbooks. Libya changed the textbooks. Okay, so now we have Syria. And it was expected, right? Because they know that, and this is what a lot of Western, even leftists, they have issues with the idea of the state. The state, they say, it's oppressive, it uses its apparatus to oppress people, to oppress the working class as part of the police state and so forth. But at the same time, if it's in the right hands, it has the ability to distribute wealth, to fight against neoliberalism and privatization and so forth. So, and the state has the ability to mass provide education, mass provide healthcare. So now when the state is being usurped by people who are, at one point, they were on the list and the bounty list of the United States, being, if you get us this terrorist, Al-Julani, Mohammed Al-Julani, we're going to give you $10 million and so forth. And now he has been rebranded as this reformed jihadist, formerly, diversity friendly terrorist. And now he's wearing suit and ties, he meets with Trump and everything. You are expected to see that he will abide by, obviously, I'm not saying that he is just a pawn of the West, because his ideology, the way that he thinks how he should run Syria is to negate what has Syria been run in the last 50 years or so before the government has changed. And I always try to tell people, sometimes my friends, they tend to focus on financial imperialism and military imperialism, but I keep telling them that there's also the propaganda and education and the battle of ideas. And so the textbooks, there is this foundation it's Israeli Zionist, right? Liberal Zionist. They try to promote peaceful coexistence through their definition of what coexistence should be or should be. They tend to review the textbooks in the Muslim countries, particularly its neighbors, right? So Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and so forth. So they have actually said that Syria's textbooks are very progressive. They talk about women equality. They are pro multipolarity. They're against the West, but then they also have grievances against the Zionists, right? And the Zionist occupation. So they're not really progressive enough. Now, this is the report by it's called the Impact SE, if your audience is interested in learning about it. So I looked at that report, and then the regime change happened a year ago, and I said, I'm sure that those textbooks will change. Funny enough, as I was writing that article a year ago about the fall of the government, I said that the textbooks will change. I landed in Libya. I was flying from the US back to home for winter break, and that's where we had that conversation. And I said that the textbooks will change. And a week after that, the new Ministry of Education comes out and removes civic education textbooks. Why? Because civic education textbooks from the Ba'athist era, they were very pro-Palestine. They're very pro also having nationalist economy or third world economy, that you try to industrialize your economy, create local manufacturing and control, and also about having empathy towards your fellow citizens. That's kind of the ideals that they promoted. They removed that. It's no longer being taught. And now the history textbooks that they talk about, for example, they were anti-Ottoman uprisings. So Syria was also under the Ottoman rule or occupation, whatever. And they had uprisings. And so some of the people who led the uprisings, they were hanged in public. And so the National Marchers' Day is removed from the national holidays. All of these things, the sacrifices the Syrians made for liberation, has been completely removed. The statues in the public sphere that remind you of anti-colonialism, they have been destroyed because of the current people who are in power. They believe that statues are idols that shouldn't be worshipped. We only worship Allah, which is, I mean, yeah, we all, like we Muslims, we worship Allah. We don't idealize things, but these are just historical artifacts, right? It's about civilization and like this. So they destroyed all of these things. Anything that Syria could have, represented as antagonism to the West. And unfortunately, the same thing happened in Libya. They destroyed Jamal Abdel Nasser's statue in 2012, right after Gaddafi was killed. They changed street names. So the memory itself, we have street names in Libya that were called the 11th of June, which is in 1970 was the date when the Americans were kicked out. We had foreign military bases in Libya, so we had nominal independence. We weren't really independent. So Gaddafi came and kicked them out. And so we have a street name, massive streets called 11th of June, because that's the date. They changed the name. So now people, obviously, we're still, oral history is very important. People still remember it. But the younger generation, they're going to be calling it a different street name. So it's these things that the West tries to apply. And then at the same time, we have indigenous people who tend to align their ideologies with the Western ones while they're calling themselves indigenous. And I think this is my last point, is that when it comes to imperialism, they would prefer to have somebody who would not necessarily be a pro-human rights or whatever. It's always the economic aspect is the most important. So you can have a reactionary, conservative, a terrorist Muslim, but as long as they keep their economy neoliberal, open to the West, such that you suppress your workers, you remove labor rights, you tell the mass, Western imperialist countries to come and invest and exploit our workers, and I'll use my military police to suppress them. Please come. They would love that. But then if I'm a reactionary, conservative, and so forth, and I say, yes, women shouldn't work and so forth, but then at the same time, I try to protect labor rights, I try to redistribute resources, I try to nationalize the economy, create accessible healthcare, this is when it becomes an issue. So in Syria, you had exactly that. You had a fundamentalist terrorist who took power, was empowered to put in power, and he did exactly that. He removed bread subsidies, oil subsidies, and he started privatizing a lot of the industry. And then also a lot of the factories dismantled and being sold to Turkey, and such that Turkey is industrializing itself even more and becoming the industrial hub in the region. And Syria is becoming just a country of, as I've written, a consumer hub. They produce nothing. And so this is kind of again, the connection between ideas and then the material consequences of that.
Could you say another word or two about, because in this article you make reference to the late Samir Amin, and in that same paragraph you point out to the specific politics that were in Syria's textbooks targeted for removal, and specifically anti-Zionism. That they were rated as very progressive. And then could you say a little bit more both about Samir Amin in terms of his importance to your analysis and what is lost in not only his death some years ago, but the sort of traditional erasure of his thoughts on these topics in a lot of Western media and discussion, and then how that relates specifically to this point about the progressive nature of those Syrian textbooks up until a few years ago.
Imagine somebody, I think this is also Gabriel Rockhill's point in his work, is that they, in Western academia, they will teach you what is commonly called the compatible left. So it took me 7 years to be in the US until I encountered Samir Amin. And I was in a liberal arts college with like liberal professors. And then I did a master's with a lot of liberals, some of them self-proclaimed Marxists, but pro-NATO somehow. And then, I met our good friend and my good mentor, Horace Campbell. And then he told me, do you know Samir Amin? And I said, I've only heard the name. I've never read his work. He's like, and you call yourself Pan-Africanist. So he was like bashing me, right? But so I was a bit taken aback that I just met him over Zoom. It was during COVID with Horace Campbell. And then he said, if you have to read Samir Amin. And so that's when I got exposed to his work, especially how he analyzed the functions of imperialism in terms of how it actually is creates an apartheid on a world scale. And what does that mean? It means the people of the global south, it's not necessarily racial only, but materially. The people in the global south are imprisoned where they have the most wealth, right? Richness of resources. But somehow they are deprived of the ability to produce technological development, to produce the necessary manufacturing and industrial capacities such that they can produce the things themselves. And so there is, how do we get out of the system such that we're exporting raw materials and we're buying them back? We produce what we don't consume and consume what we don't produce. So he was very foundational for me to understand this whole world political system and how accumulation of capitalism happens in the global north. And then he has this great book called Delinking. And I always speak about it because it's such a key thing. It's kind of, in a very simplified and maybe even simplistic terms, he highlights the notion of, can the global north, right, be it Europe and the US, survive without the global south? If we think of their resources, energy sources and everything, they can't. Can we, the global south, survive without the global north? We have everything we need as the global south countries. But so the necessary thing for imperialism to create the linking, so which links Europe with Africa, or the global north with the global south, such that we become dependent on them and they're dependent on us, but there's unequal exchange of that relationship. They're benefiting from that. So, and then he says, in order to fight this system, you need to fight it economically. You need to have sound economic policies, but then also one has to be militarily strong. So he has this famous quote that imperialism walks on two legs, the financial and the military. And then he always alludes to the brain, which is the propaganda. And so eventually when it comes to Syria, and when it came to the full spectrum warfare against that country, it was exactly that the Syrian government used chemical weapons against its people, so as the government is illegitimate. Any form of intervention against that country is legitimized, be it bombing by foreign proxies or supporting Islamic State or Zionist incursions into Syria. And then also it enabled any form of also destruction of Syria to be justified because it's a necessary evil to get rid of this so-called Baathist dictatorship. So yes, Samir Amin is very foundational analyzing the political economy of this interventionism, but then when it comes to propaganda and that role to get the manufacturing of consent or the invention of reality, right now we shouldn't be citing Chomsky anymore because of his appearance in the Epstein files, so that's why we say inventing reality, as Michael Parenti would call it, to justify whatever is going to happen to the Syrian people since 2024 or even from 2011 up to the present. And then lastly, notice that Western media, they don't talk about what's going on in Syria anymore. Just like they don't talk about what's going on in Libya, because once they destroy a country, the objective is done. They make it ambiguous. They start saying, civil war, unrest, whatever, racial, ethnic hatred, religious sectarianism. It's too complicated, too messy, and then you disassociate. But then before, you invest so much money and energy into demonizing the government that tried its best to actually create a cohesive, socially functioning society that actually can survive on its own and practice the process of delinking and maybe have regional unity somehow. So yeah, they have been repeatedly, unfortunately, successful, the imperialists, in destroying these projects.
I actually had that because you wrote that exact quote about imperialism walks on two legs in the article, and I wrote it down. So because I was like, this is great, because I always, when we're talking about politics, I always like to quote what's his name from the UK said the Democrats and the Republicans are two cheeks of the same ass. And so I was like, this is actually a great way to understand how imperialism works, because it really cannot work without both, right? You have to be able to steal the resources and profit off of the things that you steal. And in order to do that, you have to have the military strength. Like, it literally, there's no way to do one without the other. If you could, for me, I have a note here to ask you for folks who aren't familiar with the Ba'athist government and that history in Syria, if you don't mind, could you just do like a quick, I don't know if it can be quick, but if you could just give people some information, so if people are completely unfamiliar, they have like a point of reference.
Okay. You put a very difficult task. So,
sorry.
No, it's okay. So imagine this. I will explain it maybe in a simplified way, and I'm sure if there are any Baathists in the show, they'll be like, "Oh, you're desecrating us," or whatever. So, and I apologize in advance if it's not complex enough. It's an indigenous ideology that came from the region, right? So it's not communist Marxism that you try to import the Soviet model into the region or Western capitalism into the region. So it came from the existing material reality of the people. And the key name is Michel Aflaq. He is the considered to be the father of this Baathism. And Baathism, what it means is the Ba'ath, the resurrection, that you reignite the soul of the Arab region, such that it has unity and anti-colonialism. So notice that also a key thing is that when you say Baathism, they are, what can I say, kind of a pan-Arab, that they don't exclude non-Arabs. When we say Arab region, it does not mean people who are Arab ethnically or speak Arabic. We recognize that there are different languages and ethnicities. It's a civilizational context, right? So they wanted to create this project of anti-colonialism with unity. So no more borders between Arab countries, use all of our resources for anti-colonial purposes. So then the question is, so what's the difference between Baathism and Pan-Arabism? Like Pan-Arabism, we have Jamal Abdel Nasser. Why was he not a Ba'athist? I think then it comes to foreign policy issues. The Baathists themselves mostly were Christians, but they didn't have this religion. They were very anti-religion in the sense that it shouldn't dictate politics. And then the second part, they were kind of allowing the Soviet influence again in the region a bit. So they were friends of the Soviet Union. And I mean, you'd be like, what's wrong with that? The Pan-Arabs, on the other hand, they were against the idea of using any power and allowing it to have a space in the region, be it the capitalist West or the communist Soviets. So the Pan-Arabs were the most staunch you don't chip away anything from your national sovereignty. So there are these kind of disputes. Now, economically, they both are the same. I would say, just in general terms, they are nationalists. They want to nationalize industries. They want to control the means of production and distribute the wealth to the population. And there's, again, the reason why a lot of people, even in Libya, in much of the Arab region, they don't hear about Baathism is because it has been overly demonized. Just like I spent so many years here, I've nobody ever tell me, Essam, you should read, Nkrumah, or should read Gaddafi or Nasser's speeches or whatever. Nobody will, give you the tools to understand what's going on. In the region, one has to be self-driven to learn about these things. So that's kind of the Ba'ath. The party, it was created in Lebanon, and they wanted to go over to Syria and then the whole Levant region. And so the first successful government was in Syria, I believe, and then also in Iraq. So Saddam Hussein himself was Ba'athist, part of the Ba'athist party. And then they eventually did have disputes with the communists too, the Baathists. And remember, lest we forget that also Saddam Hussein killed a lot of the communists in Iraq, executions and so forth. So when he took power, and yeah, so it's a little bit. I don't want to overcomplexify it such that you need to ask me follow-up questions, but that's essentially the gist of it.
No, no, you're fine. That primer, because I know for me, I'm still there's so much that as I read a term for something, I'm like, well, what is that? Like, I've never, you know. And Malimu he yelled at me all the time too, because I definitely did not read as much as I needed to read. Sorry, Professor Campbell. So yes, but so I read it and I thought to myself, if I had not already been doing some readings, this wouldn't even register to me as a thing, right? Like, I don't even know if people understand that Baathism is a thing, right? So I wanted to make sure we gave as much, the little context as we could. So I appreciate it. The other thing that I would, and this is going to be another heavy hitter question, I forewarn you. This is what happens when I don't get to ask you questions all the time, because they all just pile up at the end. So there is a really important understanding about the geopolitics of this region that I think people don't, I think people who don't just look at a map, I encourage people, honestly, pull up a map, right? And just look at the geographical layout of, one, remembering that all of these borders were created by people that had nothing to do with the land when they created the borders, right? So just remember that all of these fictional lines that get drawn everywhere are created by people who wanted to steal resources and wanted to make sure that they could separate the people so they could create these internal problems, right? Putting that there. The lines exist on maps. They're there. But I want people really at times to pull up a map and understand how this region lays out, and understand that when you look at countries like Syria and Libya, and understanding that when you go from Southwest Asia into Africa, into the Sahel region, you have to cross through these countries, right? These are all throughways into the resources and into the place that currently, when you think about what's happening in Syria, in Libya, you have to remember that one of the biggest problems that Western imperialism is facing right now is the Sahel region, right? And so I really encourage people to understand the geopolitics of all of these things. I don't know, Essam, I mean, there's so much there, I know. But could you talk a little bit about how this geographical map, what the role of that that actual geography, what the role it is that plays in all of these things, as we see Western imperialism throwing out people, installing people they want, all these things, so people understand that there is an actual geographical reason for the things that are occurring via empire.
Well, I think if you're interested in just simplifying this complex task that you have given me, I'm just brought back to WikiLeaks Hillary Clinton's emails, right? In 2011, Sarkozy and the French president was, the idea of intervening in Libya. They said that key thing is to prevent the creation of this gold-backed currency in Libya. That was one. But then they said that we want to have a larger influence in Libya's southern neighbors, namely the Sahel countries. So you would ask, okay, what does Libya have to do? If you take over Libya, destroy it and so forth, what will it have to do? Well, the idea is that you destabilize to create legitimacy for intervention, just like it happened in Iran a month and a half ago. Destabilization through sanctions, and then you try to intervene and justify that you were gonna go and bomb them, right? So what happened in Libya is that they destroyed the country. They made this massive borders of almost 5,000 kilometers sparsely open. And then they smuggled weapons to people who said separatists, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, terrorists, and whatever. And they told them that, you start depriving them through sanctions and so forth, and they have weapons. So they start to take issues into their own hands. So the Sahel, Mali, Niger, and Chad, and Burkina Faso countries, they were destabilized because of Libya. If you ask anybody from those countries, ask them how was the relative peace at the time compared to now, they would say, we wish it was pre-2011. Because the safety of Libya meant it also needs to cooperate with Egyptians, with the Algerians, and so forth. And then when you put neo-colonial puppets in Libya, they are not going to care about Africa, right? The so-called, again, the vision that I started with, that there's anything in the Sahara south of it is not Arab, so we don't really care about it. But our fates are interconnected. And so by the destruction of Libya, you had the destabilization of Sahel countries. France comes in, and for 10 years, they do these supposedly anti-terrorist activities, and they fail. And now the Sahel countries rise up against the French neo-colonialism, and they create the Alliance of Sahel States, which is, a great model that is not spoken enough about. And it's being targeted right now by US imperialism. Similarly, when in 2011, when they overthrew the government in Egypt and overthrew in Tunisia, they were smuggling weapons, those two governments, into the rebel that were fighting the Libyan government in 2011. So geography is very important to understand how events that are happening internally inside a country have not just global ramifications, but also regional ramifications, how the neighboring countries enable it. And I know that potentially we'll have time to speak about Iran, but look at Iran's neighbors. Right, Armenia wants to join NATO. Azerbaijan sells oil to the Zionist and complicit in genocide. Turkey is a NATO country. Afghanistan, they have had border issues and skirmishes with Iran, especially related to water resources. And then when it comes to those, Iraq, you have US military bases with Norwegians, supposedly a peaceful country. They have people stationed there. And then military bases across. You have in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in UAE. It's surrounded, right? So one cannot analyze a country as like what's commonly called in academic terms is like methodological nationalism, that you just focus on the state as a closed system. The country is intersecting with its neighbors all the time, right? So and I think that sometimes when we fixate on one country, just like what's happening in Syria is an internal matter or whatever, we lose how external players and regional ones exert power and influence for their own benefit, but sometimes also that tends to overlap with US imperialism. So hopefully that addresses your question. Yeah.
No, it perfectly. And you brought up Iran because you sent us another article, which is I have so many things in my head about all of this stuff. I think mostly because I don't know, and just like you said, like mainstream media has removed conversations about from, like, they just don't talk about it, right? And like we're just gonna pretend after everything that was given to support this idea that we had to remove this leader and he had to go. We have to, put, like, all of a sudden now we're just going to pretend like it's continue to be problem there is a problem anymore, because it's, it's essentially Western imperialism that has now created this ongoing situation, right? And we're just going to act like none of that's an issue. They've long since stopped talking about Libya. And I do want to make sure we talk about Libya some more, because the murder of Gaddafi's son was very jarring for me, as just watching what was happening in the news. But we can start with that on, and this idea of the axis of resistance, right? And how the project in this moment seems to be, how can we pick apart the different parts of the axis in order to ensure that we don't allow the resistance to actually survive, right? So everything that the US, Canada, Europe, UK, all these countries have been doing in support of the Zionist project, right? In Lebanon, it's like nonstop. And at the core of it, it really is like, how do we persist in our attempt to throttle any ability for these countries to work together in order to maintain their own sovereignty, right? Like, this is the one thing that they don't want, because if you have, once you understand that the resources are being stolen and the goal for the people who are living in any of these countries is simply to just live, right? They don't want, like, they didn't ask the US to come and install a new government to help them with democracy. And it always cracks me up when people talk about that, because I'm like, bruh, look around. We don't have democracy here. So this idea that we're going to go somewhere else and install democracy, which is a thing that is foreign to this place, this land that we live on currently, just, it boggles the mind. But you shared a really great interview, and it was Pampazugaret that was on about Iran. And so we can start with that and talk about, you know, this role that Iran plays with regard to the axis of resistance, and why people should be paying attention to what's happening, and not in the way that we're like, oh, they're protesters and we have to save the protester, because that, like, they're shooting protesters, like, you know, like a couple of states away, and you're worried about, like, how, okay, sure, we can go with the idea, but is there, you know, if you want to just kind of speak on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I think Iran also, like civilizationally, just like Syria and Iraq, they represent so much weight in history of the region, like the former, commonly called Mesopotamia, and the religions, history, languages, literature, spiritualities. It's such a key country and a key state that is actually preserving that history. And it wasn't always this way, right? So, and I think, if I may, I'm going to interject and ask a question. Can I speak about what was it like before 1979?
You can speak on whatever you want to speak on.
Sorry if I'm long-winded, so please, Jared or Renee, please feel free to.
No, that's why we brought you. You're the guest. You are the voice. We're here to listen to you.
I don't want to overstay my stay, you know, but so in 1979, but people always talk about that, was this Islamic revolution, but nobody talks about how it was before. The only thing that we get before is these memes on social media where there's like women wearing bikini and sitting in a computer lab, and you know, and then they say, oh, look how women before the Islamic revolution, they were so free, because wearing bikini means they're free, right? It doesn't mean potentially you're sexually exploited or, you know, objectified and so forth. Also, it's very Western centric that the idea of liberty is to have less, the ability to have less clothes. And then we can discuss this whole idea of owning one's body and so forth, but just one has to put it also in the cultural context where these things exist. So a lot of those pictures are not necessarily true. Some of them are actually taken from Afghanistan before the US supported the Taliban to take over and support the actual oppression of women there. So the country, in 1953, there was this Mossadegh, I think, prime minister, who nationalized oil, and then the MI6, which is the equivalent of the CIA for Britain, they couped him, and then they privatized oil. And then since then, this liberal Shah that oppressed religious freedom has been running the country, and he was collaborating openly and freely with the Zionist entity, such that the intelligence of the country was intermingling with the Mossad, the SAVAK, it's called, forces that exists in Iran to suppress dissent and so forth, was collaborating with the Zionists. And they never participated in the wars that happened in the region that were against that were for Palestine. And so Iran was a kind of a satellite state of the US, and they never contributed even to the oil embargoes effectively, and so forth. So 1979 takes place, which is a moment in history where there was a religious resurgence, right? Such that in the Muslim Brotherhood, they were in Egypt, they were pissed off that the president in Anwar Sadat, who was later assassinated, normalized relations with the Zionists. That there was just larger Wahhabism movement being pushed by the Saudi Arabia. So comes this Islamic revolution. Funny enough, it wasn't liberal economically, it was actually nationalist. So what they did was they kicked the Shah out, they installed this Islamic Republic, which I think 10 days ago commemorated 47 years of its date when it took place in 1979. And they transformed the economy. And what happens? The US pushes Iraq. At the time, Saddam Hussein was a CIA asset to actually launch war for 8 years against Iran. The question is, why is it all Arab countries were supporting Iraq against Iran? Because Iran was clearly from the first couple of days, they even changed the names of the street where there's the US embassy to one of the revolutionary leaders of the Irish Republican Army that's fighting for independence in Northern Ireland. So they changed the names of the streets to say that our struggle, which is anti-imperialism, is connected to the Irish people, to the people in Cuba, and so forth. So it was from its beginning was anti-imperialist. So that country now goes through 8-year war, but then they have that kind of stalemate and peace. And then it becomes this country where it's sovereign economically, diplomatically, and so forth. Women are actually empowered such that there's massive rate. The key leaders in the industries of STEM, they tend to be women in Iran. A lot of the scientists are women. A lot of the people who run the media sphere are women. And there has been successive attempts for the US to intervene and overthrow the government because it was anti-imperialist government. So now, since 2011, when things start to shift very quickly in the region, they notice that there are certain key forces in the region that align with Iran, given that more and more anti-imperialist countries were killed and overthrown, like Iraq, 1, Libya, 2. So they created this thing called Axis of Resistance. And I don't think they call it themselves. It's a name that a lot of people who embrace what Iran is doing, they started calling it that, which included Syria, parts of Lebanon, particularly related to Hezbollah, parts of parts of Iraq, and then Iranian government, and then in addition to that, Yemen, right? Particularly the Houthi. And all of these people have these groups have massive popularity. It's easy when they have unity to put them all together and say this is the axis of evil, right? So it makes the imperialist talking points easier when you say, oh, look at all these countries together. Obviously, they have been under tremendous amount of sanctions, and you probably heard me speak about sanctions all the time because I was involved in this International People's Tribunal in 2023, giving testimonies about the impact of sanctions on the people, be it in Cuba, Libya, Venezuela, Iran, Haiti, Syria, Iraq, so many countries that are under US sanctions, and also the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. China is also under sanctions. Not a lot of people talk about that, and they're persisting. So in 2022, there was a woman who gets fined for not wearing the hijab properly. And so there is this mandatory kind of law that exists, and then she dies, and I emphasize the word dies, in the custody of the police, and then she literally fainted at the custody of the police, not being handcuffed or anything, and she died. And so a lot of people say she was beaten to death by the police. And then people say it was racialized because she is from a specific group. I think she's Kurdish Iranian, right? So the Iranian state is anti-Kurd. So massive protests happen in Iran. It's called Women, Life, and Freedom. And the key thing about articulating this thing, if I as a dude, right, a man, right, criticize this movement, I sound as if I'm against women, or I'm pro women's oppression. My issue is that Iranian issues should be solved through Iranian means, right? It's not through Western imperialism and sanctions. And I think Iranian people should decide of how to navigate the local structures to solve their issues. You will never hear me, even today, under the current neo-colonial structures of Libya, to ask any foreign countries to give us liberation, right? Salvation does not come from outside, this idea of messianic force that are going to come and rescue you. So in 2022, there was a war on Iran that's being done through this propaganda that we stand with Iranian women, as if, standing for the government or for Iranian people makes you against the women. So there's this whole like false dichotomy that's created. In 23 to 25, there was this ongoing genocide that Iran actually is supportive of the Palestinian factions that want Palestinian liberation. So in Palestine, there are multiple factions. One of them is the Palestinian Authority that is conservative, that actually oppresses the Palestinian people, and it's backed by the Zionists. And it's a product of this Oslo Accord, and they have been running Palestinian territories for some time. But inside Gaza, there's factions that actually are pro-liberation of Palestine. And they have been supported historically by Iran, but also before by Libya and before Syria, before 2024, such that weapons were smuggled to them. So now you have Palestine, Syria, Iran, Lebanon, and then Yemen, those five. They are part of this axis. So how do we make the connection between Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon? Okay, if we destroy Syria, Lebanon will be left on its own. So this is why the US and its proxies in the region, they were very adamant on producing propaganda and also attacking Syria. So Syria has been destroyed. It's no longer part of the axis of resistance. So, and then it takes me to I hate the naming of this, which is the 12th Day War, because it sounds, Trump tweeted it. He said, I hereby declare that this war is over. It ran for 12 days, and I hereby declare that the name of it is the 12th Day War. Hereafter, it's called the 12th Day. So everybody started calling it 12th Day War for some reason. Yes, it did run for 12 days, but it should be given something else, not that Trump dictates it himself. And it happened in June, when Israel decided to bomb Iran and start to assassinate targets, particularly inside Iran, nuclear facilities, Iranian scientists, and so forth. So one has to always recognize that the Mossad's intelligence is very extensive. Yes, they killed a lot of civilians, but the ability to target a person amongst the civilians and kill all of them together is quite sophisticated process. Iran, what did it do? It showed some of its power. Now, Iran, I have to give it to them. Sorry, that was just a phone call. They are very good at understanding the defense that exists in the region. So throughout this 23 to 25, before the 12th Day War, there were twice where Iran bombed, or at least tried to bomb Israel. And what did they do? They sent the cheapest weapons, rockets that cost roughly $20,000 per rocket. Right? And we know that the Iron Dome costs, the air defenses, one rocket costs maybe $3 to $5 million. So when you send 20,000 rockets, could cost you like $20 million for Iran. In order to shoot them down, you would be costing yourself $1 billion or so for Israel. So it was an economic battle that we can really harm you by these small rockets that are so cheap and locally produced. And so multiple times they learned also which countries will use their air defenses to prevent Iran from bombing. So Jordan was actually important in defending Israel, but not important in defending Iran. So Jordan is also a neo colony of the US. So when this June war happened, Iran understood how to attack this air, Iron Dome and the air defense system inside the country. And they resulted in massive economic losses that was roughly from 30 to 50 billion, we're talking, in damages. Yes, Iran did also lose a lot of people, some people from 1,000 to 1,500, and some people take it to 2,000, and mostly civilians. This is the key thing. And so the war gets stopped because the US supposedly bombs the nuclear facilities, and there's a peace. Now comes again Iran. Iran is under tremendous amount of sanctions, and it's similar to Libya. Like here, I can't send money back home. Family has to open bank accounts in neighboring countries, right, to send them money. So that means they have to fly and then declare, and they have to pay the fees that you're taking money out of the country and so forth. So it's very draining process, financially, also psychologically. The sanctions also, they have been approved by the United Nations. It's called the SNAP sanctions, which really harms Iranian economy from exchanging with any country in the world. And then Trump doubled that by saying anybody who trades with Iran is going to get tariffed 50%. So that even India stopped buying Iranian rice because they are afraid to be tariffed, right? So I will send this to in the chat as well to Renee, but this the head of the Treasury of the United States, he came out a couple of maybe 2 weeks ago, and he said we have tanked the Iranian economy, and the protests that took place in January 2026, this is our doing. So obviously, how do they justify it through media? They say Iran is dealing with Venezuela. Venezuela is a bad country, Iran is a bad country, they both are bad, so this is what bad people do, they're gangs, they collaborate together against this rules-based world order. So, which is actually not wrong, it's true. When you're sanctioned and you're deprived and you're starving and you seek help from fellow humans who care about and empathize with your struggle, Venezuela is the same thing. Because of the Iranian expertise, they have been helping to sell and also refine some of the Venezuela's complicated engineering oil that needs engineering oil. The oil in Venezuela is not easily, you just extract it and refine it very easily. It's between through rocks and so forth. So Iran was helping Venezuela that. And there was economic cooperation between the two fellow sanctioned countries. They call it a kind of a collusion of terrorist states, like part of this axis of evil expanding to this Western hemisphere that is supposedly called the US hemisphere, right now. So they say we're going to put sanctions. So the Treasury Secretary, comes out and he says the protests that took place in Iran, they are our doing. We did it because we destroyed the economy. So the sanctions, they have left Iranian economy. When you look at the exchange rate, it used to be $1, maybe 50,000 riyal, to $1 being 1,500,000 in just a couple of days. So the purchasing power of the riyal has been completely obliterated. You know, it would take you a month's salary, according to some people, to get 6 pieces of eggs, right? This is how bad it is because of how the sanctions. So people went out and protesting. The protests, some of them were genuine. Like they were like, okay, I'm going to be starving now. What do we do? So we need reforms. But then when you see the Pompeo comes out, the Mossad comes out, and then they say some of the protesters, they are our people. They're the CIA and the Mossad. And then you start seeing images of some of the protests where the protesters themselves are armed with sophisticated guns. And they're shooting at the security forces and they're shooting at the protesters. Literally, there were people behind the protesters, chanting with them, pulled out guns and started shooting protesters. Obviously, there are protesters that didn't do that, right? But there was that. And this is the idea, even if we look at the history of Yugoslavia, they literally, the handbook of nonviolent provocation, they call it, is to be violent. Part of the National Endowment of Democracy, when they try to promote democracy somewhere, when there's a government that's anti-West, how do they create groups that are anti-government? They train them in non-violent confrontations, but it's actually all escalatory. It tries to escalate with the government through violent means. If they harm you, make sure you harm them back. And so that creates uproar. And so eventually, this is what happened in Iran, in such that more than 800 security forces were killed, and roughly 2,000 to 3,000 civilians were killed. This is according to the Iranian government. If you want to hear CIA-backed outlets, we can go even 50,000, 40,000, 30,000 people were killed, right? And so this whole process is and then you say, okay, oh my God, we have to have the responsibility to protect, which is R2P doctrine of the kind of world order. If there are people who are oppressed, we have to go and save them. They did that in Yugoslavia, in Bosnia, in Kosovo. They did that in Libya, and they did that supposedly also in Syria. And now they're trying to think and do it again. So this is kind of a long history of US trying to intervene in that particular country. Why? Because it has a very good oil. And the oil, when I say very good, it's not like sweet, it tastes like candy. It's just so easy to refine. Libya's oil is so easy to refine, right? And so cheap. And then, so it's very, like the material that you extract out of it, it's very easily done compared to other countries like Norway's oil or some of Russia's oil and also Venezuela's oil. So, so yeah, that's why Iran is being targeted, because it represents also the hope for the region to fight against Zionist incursions. Because if there's no more Iran, if you really just think about it, there's no more Lebanon like Hezbollah, right? There's no more Yemen, because Iran, there's no more force that's gonna fight, Zionist expansion. Every single country in the region, including Libya, right, with the exception of Algeria and Tunisia, they have relations with the Zionists. Libya is right now tried to normalize relations 3 years ago, and then I was in Libya and we overthrew the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because she just met with the Zionists. But all of the countries are just part of this Abraham Accord project of normalization. So having Iran as part of this axis of resistance is really a stumbling block for a complete hegemony in the region. Sorry.
Look how well you listen. I think I'm joking. This is such an informative. There's so much that's always missing, because I simply, for as much as I read and try to, there's so much that I don't understand, right? And there's so much that I am still learning about, right? So for me, having you join, because this is innate information for you, right? It's like talking about dialectics with Luna Oy. Like, she just knows. Like, I don't have to, right? Like, it's there. It's like I don't have to worry about it. So I really appreciate, I know you feel like you're saying a lot, but you have to say a lot, right? That's the only way to explain it so people can understand what all is happening. I don't know that you could do it any better than you do. And I appreciate your brilliance. I truly, truly do.
Thank you. No, I hope that sometimes when I speak so much that I'm not like boring people, or the convoluted ideas in my head are not well translated to people. So please do let me know if anything is not clear. And
I feel very well. I feel so much more like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Like, this really makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate it. Jared, did you have a question? Did you have a thing? No? Okay. So I'd like, if we could, to talk about Libya before we close out. And one of the things, so last year when BAP was doing like their multiple series for shutting down AFRICOM, and we were doing a lot of teachings and stuff, I read, I still haven't finished the whole book, but I read, oh my goodness, I'm going to blank on the title, but it's basically how Europe developed Africa. And one of the things that I learned reading that book was about the role that the overthrow of Libya and the murder of Gaddafi, like what that had to do with what happened in the Sahel region. Like this we're going to destabilize this area, and then we'll start moving things slowly to start destabilizing other areas. And, you mentioned this about France, being in the area in 10 years and how it all started in Libya, right? And so I think when I heard that Gaddafi's son had been killed, I was like, I was shocked, mostly because I reason think that like there's like this chance that people that we want to try and be able to do a thing will actually be allowed to do a thing. And I don't know why I even have that thought. Like, I still can't watch documentaries about Fred Hampton without like losing my mind, because every time I see him speak and I think about how devious the whole process was of making sure that his voice was removed from the register, right? Like this process that imperialism always has of removing the people from the register who are going to be able to actually guide people towards resistance, right? And so And I had questions, right? Like he went to school. He, there are all these things that we never really know about people, but still at the same time, when I heard, I was very much like they did it again. And I don't know why I didn't expect them to do it again, because this is what they always do. But if you could, and I don't want to overwhelm you, me with my big questions. And you talked a lot about the history of Libya already, so I don't know how much more we need to dig in. But if you could talk about how the murder of Gaddafi's son, the person that was installed years ago to run the military in Libya, is all part, like how all of these things kind of, ensure that the region stays destabilized. Because in the end, that's the goal, right? Like they don't want stabilization, because Lord forbid that the people are able to actually do the things that they want to do, because that just means a problem for Western imperialism. So I know that was another big question. I keep doing this to you, and I'm sorry, but I'll let you take over there.
I just want to say quickly that the links to this and the other articles are in the show description, so folks want to, because I myself included, but I think a lot of us missed this, a real focus on the assassination of Gaddafi's son and who he was and what. But you, in your article, you the buzzwords that have people like him targeted were all mentioned. So, but yeah, just want to let people know it's in the show description.
No, thanks for putting it in the show. So it was very hard to write an article for, sometimes like just like this week I wrote an article, obituary from Michael Parenti. I did not know him personally, but it was, I talked to some friends and we were like, let's work on this article together. And it was very kind of intellectual thing to do, just get the ideas from Michael Parenti and put them on paper. But, on Monday, which was the 3rd of February, I hear the news that he was assassinated. And it was like complete shock, because, people who tend to get assassinated, they're the ones who are like agitating people, going out and speaking. And, I'm constantly thinking Malcolm X, Fidel Castro, how he survived so many assassinations, or Muammar Gaddafi. But this guy has been in peacefully, avoiding politics, avoiding agitating Libyan factions for many years since he was let out of prison. And I think this has to do also with his upbringing and how he was taught. So Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, who's the son of Muammar Gaddafi, was roughly 50-something years old. I think he was born in 1973. He grew up in Libya. He actually even went to public schools in Libya up until he finished university, where he got his PhD from London School of Economics. And given the fact that he was the son of Muammar Gaddafi, at the key country that has created a lot of problems for the Western imperialist world order, they were interested in inculcating him with these liberal ideas. So he did his PhD on the transformation of civil society, very liberal. You read it, it would be like, how are you the son of this revolutionary person, right? But I think sometimes people need to write, we think what they write for a dissertation is exactly who they are. But sometimes when you have committee members that really put obstacles on your work, you have to produce literature that actually aligns with the committee, so you get the PhD out of the way. And hence this mantra that people say, a best dissertation is a written one. So, but he was instrumental that while he was there, Libya just got out of the sanctions in 2003. And so he was there for up until I think 2006, when he got the PhD, and he worked with famous people who are close to the royal empire, the British Empire, like Anthony Giddens, the intellectuals of the empire itself. He was close to them, and some of them even served on his committee. And some of them came to Libya and debated democracy with Gaddafi. So he was able to leverage all of that. He gave a lot of conferences about Libya as an opportunity for investment, but without chipping away national sovereignty. So he was a little bit this neoliberal person that thought that financial flows have to come through Libya, and so Libya has to be integrated with the world, but without undermining sovereignty of the country. So there was no privatization in Libya happening. There was no cutting people's welfare or any of those things when he was advocating for those changes in Libya. And he never took power in Libya. He was the face of the change that Libya wanted to pull itself away from this image that it was Gaddafi's a maniac. Gaddafi's going to blow up the embassies. Gaddafi this, Gaddafi that. It was like the late Michael Parenti. Oh my God, Gaddafi, under your bed, Gaddafi, right? So changed the image of Libya completely to this open to the West and also open to economic cooperation. But at the same time, Libya was doing that in a smart way such that it was helping its sovereign wealth fund to grow such that it can invest in Africa and create that Pan-African project. So Saif was very instrumental. 2010 comes, he steps down from this vision and he says, I'm gonna be in charge of this humanitarian Gaddafi organization, right? To help displaced people across the world, so goes into the humanitarian field. In 2011, he gets to prominence again because he was the first one to come out and speak about the protests. And he, when he spoke for like maybe 25 to 30 minutes, he literally warned that, just so you know, if these things turn violent, we might end up killing each other, and this killing will last for 40 years, if not more. There's no more investments going to be. Libya is going to be destroyed and fractured, and then also it's going to be causing fissures. And we Libyans, we are so like, a person from Western Libya is married to the person in Southeast, and this person in Southwest is related to the Northeast. So it's very intermingled society. So when you try to create a civil war, it's going to really be, everybody's going to feel it in that sense. He warned, right? People didn't listen. People said, well, no, protested. NATO came, destroyed the country. He was captured a month after his dad passed away. And he was put in jail, and then he was also has accusations by the laughable International Criminal Court, because a court that tends to handpick people and cannot apply its power to actually get like Benjamin Netanyahu or Gallant, the former defense minister of the Zionists, right? So it's very selectively, it was done on Libyan leadership, Gaddafi, his son, and then the head of the Libyan intelligence, 3 people. So he was put in jail, and then he faced fake trial, and that led to the judge to say there's going to be execution. And so there were appeal processes for many years, and then eventually there was national amnesty, and he was released. So he was released in 2017, I believe, and then he never left Libya. We did not know where he was in Libya, right? Nobody knew. And he never spoke. There's no public images of him or whatsoever. So he has been like this, where is he? What's his story? What's going on? And Libyans kept fighting throughout these years. There were multiple civil wars. In 2014, there was one. In 2017, there was another. Then 2019, 2020, there was another one. Until the United Nations came in and parachuted yet another government. And then they said, okay, guys, you're going to run the elections in the country in 21. Now he saw an opportunity. The people who are anti-imperialists, they don't like civil wars, right? So this is very thing important to clarify. Civil wars, they tend to happen when proxy foreign powers that are willing to sell themselves for the benefit of foreign interests get involved, right? In Libya, you cannot be a person who's anti-imperialist and want backing by foreign governments in order to do national liberation. They maybe send you weapons, but it shouldn't be troops and so forth. Look at all Eastern Libya. It has like Emirati intelligence. And then Western Libya, it has Turkish intelligence and Italian and British and American. AFRICOM is across the country. So it's like there's nobody who's trying to fight for liberation. So Saif al-Islam, being somewhat of this liberal-ish pro-peace, he never encouraged his supporters to pick up weapons and go and fight these neo-colonial entities. So in 21, when the elections were supposed to be planned, he came out and then he did an interview with the New York Times, which shows that how much power he has, right? The ability to be in seclusion, in isolation, and invite the New York Times to come and take a picture of you and record you and have an interview with you, and where you say that you answer the questions of New York Times, where have you been all these years? It's public. You can read the article back in 2021. And then he said he's going to run for the elections. So The reason, and then this is, again, if one reads history, this International Foundation electoral systems that has, that supposedly is, it's an American foundation, Washington, D.C. based, that tends to run elections in much of the world. It helps countries to run elections, especially in countries that need democracy, right? So they have run elections from Nicaragua to Ukraine to, now they did it in Libya in 2012 when we had elections after Gaddafi was killed. And they have been in the country since then. So they created presidential election laws and parliamentary ones, but they didn't think that Saif al-Islam is gonna play a factor in this. So he comes out in November and he films, there's a group of photographers with him. They film him as he goes and submits his documents to run for the elections. Now, this is where you kind of put a massive rock inside a chain and everything gets stopped. The West starts to panic. All Western leaders, they start saying, we cannot have Saif al-Islam run. Saif al-Islam is wanted by International Criminal Court. Well, according to Libyan laws, he's innocent. And if you guys care, you should also catch other people and do certain things. So it's not about national sovereignty. So what ends up happening, these lawyers who are functionaries of imperialism, they decide to say that he cannot run because he has been accused of something, which is like he committed crimes against humanities in Libya. But then being accused is not being, a verdict is not given. So he actually was kicked out of the election process, and people were like, oh my God, how is this possible? There was a massive protests actually on social media. People were burning their ballots, election ballots, in protest of him being removed from the elections. His lawyer was like, I'm gonna go to appeal this. In order to appeal it, you have to go to the court. Now, this guy, the former CIA asset, I think up to the present, he was parachuted, his name is Khalifa Haftar. He was parachuted in 2011 to fight against Gaddafi. And then he created a national army called the Libyan National Army. And he's in charge of much of southern Libya and eastern Libya. He decides to block the court where the lawyer of Saif al-Islam is supposed to submit the appeal. He puts militias, he puts gangs around it and prevents the lawyer from entering that area. The people who live in that area, they're against what's happening, so they go out and protest. And they confront with the militias and they massive protests saying, let the lawyer submit the documents. Like, this is how messed up, right? This Khalifa Haftar guy. Eventually, the lawyer submits the documents, appeals it, and Saif al-Islam is back to the ballot. Everybody freaks out in the West again. Joey Hood, I even cited him in the article, he comes out, he says, well, it's up to the Libyans to decide who runs and who's not, but we have an issue with Saif al-Islam running. It's weird, and the international community has an issue with Saif al-Islam running. So on the day of the elections, everything's closed, there's militias everywhere, and they said that it's force majeure, elections are canceled. So Saif al-Islam was like, okay, I guess there's no elections. Since 21, he has been in seclusion again, and he's waiting for the next opportunity for elections. So now Libyan economic situation has gotten really, really bad. And when it gets bad, people start to go out and protesting. So in 2020, it got really bad because it was COVID and it was war. And so Libyans started to protest. They wanted to overthrow the government. United Nations comes in and says, we'll do elections. Now, Libyans, it's getting very, very bad. But then if they do elections again, Saif al-Islam will come out. So it was, I think it was an orchestration from the West to assassinate Saif al-Islam and Gaddafi, who has massive popularity, to make sure that there is no obstacle for all of the other candidates who have substantial power in Libya to run, who are all pro-West. So now, not only you create laws to exclude people, but you actually excluded people from running in the first place by assassinating them. And so what does Saif al-Islam represent, and this is the final thing, I think, is that he represents not like, history does not go backwards, right? It goes forward, but then also with the political and historical weight of the experiences that Libyans lived. So what he represents is the only candidate that actually is anti-West. And what do I mean by anti-West? It's not like this irrational, pathological animosity, death to America, death to whatever, like some people frame it as such. It's literally understanding that how the Western countries, they tend to intervene and supplant the sovereign development of countries so that they cannot be sovereign, that they become dependent. They always need security help. They call AFRICOM to help, like Nigeria, right? They always need economic aid. They don't have sovereignty. But even if they do develop, it's always with subservience, like United Arab Emirates, how it's developed, but with complete subservience to US imperialism. So this is why he represented what was Libya before 2011. And so that's why killing him was more than just killing a person, it's killing the idea of resistance against imperialism.
So much. We have to figure out like how to manage all these people that I want to come on regularly. I have like this ongoing list that the minute the person's done, I'm like, when can we bring them back? And there's just not enough.
We're just gonna have to schedule some Patreon specials, some pop-up specials, some Saturdays specials on other days. You know, Saturdays on a Tuesday. You know, like we're gonna just have to make it work.
Because you really,
because you got way more than 52
yeah,
decent conversations already piled up and waiting. You can't do it just one a week.
And maybe my questions will stop being so overwhelming if I talk to you more.
No, I think also like I want to thank you for being so generous with the time, because sometimes people ask a very complex question, but you're supposed to answer it in 2 minutes, and I think sometimes it's very hard. And it's not like showing off, oh, how much I know, but it does the question and the answer injustice and the reality as well. So thank you for also being open to me speaking.
Listen, I want to learn, and this happens every week, and she yells at me every week. But when this happened, my mother was like, I don't know what to think about this. She was like, he disappeared. He went to school in London. There's all these, there's very little. And as per usual, it's very difficult to get real information about anything when you're living in the imperialist core, right? Like they're not, the New York Times may do one article, but, knowing them, like you probably have to pay money in order to read. Like, it's like one of those things where trying to get any real information it's brutal. And so I really like, the point, I don't know why people do that. You're right. They do. They ask questions and then they want you to answer in 2 minutes. And I don't know the point of that. Like, how do you get the information and you don't give people time to really dig through and provide the historical reference and all these things and how they're all tied together. And for me, listening, especially because I remember when this happened with the elections in Libya, and thinking to myself, people will look at that situation and say, oh, they canceled. They never do that here. They don't cancel elections here, and not understand how many times your elections are directly impacted by decisions that are made by somebody in the duopoly that decided that they just didn't want, this person to be on the ballot, or in this particular state, we're not even going to provide opportunities for people to be on the ballot. Like, we're just as oppressed here with our choices and ability to make a choice, right? Like yes, the elections may go, but if you work a job where you can't take the day off, where you can't go stand online, if they don't do mail-in, just happen to be out of town or away whenever these things happen, they don't allow early voting. Like, all of these things are part of a construct that prevents you from actually being able to have a voice. Right. So it's no better, in my opinion. Right. Like, OK, great. Like, we announced it was election day. But as we saw last year, 90-something million people chose not to participate. Right. And so, yes, a chunk of those people were like, I just don't care enough to go do it. But there is also a large portion of those people that are sick of the choices. They're sick of the duopoly. They're sick of this whole process where you're closing all the polling sites. Now I got to drive an hour and stand online with 500 other people, and I got to take the day off of work. Like, all these things, they all play a role in it. And I think it's very much understated how difficult the process is to actually have a voice in the electoral process here, right? It's it's fascinating because people will look at what happened in Libya and say, "Oh, look, they just canceled the elections. Look at that," and not even be able to parse together how the canceling of elections, it basically happens everywhere here. Multiple people, right? It happens in pockets and in ways that people don't understand. That, like, it's the same imperial project problem.
Right, and I think it's the creation of the illusion that there's a choice here. The political economy of the elections itself in the United States, one cannot run unless they're extremely wealthy, and cannot propose any radical ideas because the populace has been injected with so much, excuse the language, but garbage information. And I still have been here right now for many years in the US. I don't understand why is it that you have elections on a weekday as opposed to a weekend? Why is it not a national holiday? Something like that. It's and then the other part, which is like the 97 million, how many of those actually registered for elections and intentionally made this political statement, I'm not going to vote because both of them suck, right? Which I think is a lot of people missed it. They just speak about the 97 million, the total people who are eligible to vote but didn't vote, but there are people who registered, and because they're disgusted by the choices, they were like, no, I'm not, it's a political statement in of itself to register and not vote.
Leah, and I'm putting it up. You touched upon this, so I'm putting it up just as like a note because it is all related. I don't, she says, and how does this relate to Trump's drone strike in Sokoto, Nigeria, under the guise of protecting Christians, and Tinubu's agreement, AFRICOM is encircling the AES Confederation, and it's the same imperialist project, right? Like, it's literally like, pause, press go, pause, press go. Like, it's just an ongoing project of pretending that they're sending people in to do something, and then it never being about that, right? I always like to remind people, like, whenever the Christians went into these places because they were backwards places that needed the Bible and all these things, like, they left the Bibles and took all the resources. Like, it was never really about doing anything that was going to be beneficial for the people that they were supposedly going there to quote unquote help. I don't know if you want to just chime in at all about that. I know we're close to time, but
so unfortunately, Nigerian leadership has been quite reactionary. Back in 2019, they said the AFRICOM's base shouldn't be in Germany because the headquarters of AFRICOM is in Western Germany. They said that should be in Nigeria. And they have historically been a place where they have collaborated substantially with the United States, despite the fact that the United States even is preventing their oil industry from developing, such that Nigeria has to send oil and buy it back in a refined form. So I cannot understand why the Nigerian leadership is, pro-US and in that sense. And the Nigerian leadership also were very instrumental in creating this ECOWAS, which is the Community of West African States, to go and target the Alliance of Sahel States. So when the Alliance of Sahel States was formed, especially when the revolutionary coups happen, or the people's coups, I call them, because there are military coups that tend to oppressing people. There are ones that actually a manifestation of popular demand, which is to overthrow a government through military means. They really transformed Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. As soon as particularly Niger happened, which is extremely rich country in uranium and gold, they decided, the ECOWAS, to create a force to go and attack Niger. But then this is where the idea of Mali and Burkina Faso, they said, if you attack them, we're going to attack you. And this is why it's a necessity they create the Alliance of Sahel States. Now, look at this. In 2023, there was also another coup that took place in Gabon. And then it was a reactionary coup. It was a coup, internal family disputes. One cousin took power from the other cousin, kind of coup. ECOWAS did not say a single thing. They said, we just want peaceful existence in the country because the status quo is not going to change. Benin, which promised Niger that it's going to allow it to export oil in 2024, so such that through a Chinese-built pipeline, agreed to that. Roughly in April 2024, head of AFRICOM visits Benin and tells them, you cannot allow China to help Niger. And so they decided to block the pipeline. Now, why am I speaking about not Nigeria yet? No, but listen to this. A couple of months ago, there was a coup attempt that happened in Benin. Who goes and attacks Benin? And the coup, who was it? It was people against the system. They were pro-alliance of Sahel states. They're pro-AES. So they wanted to create Benin into that format, into that alliance, right? So it's going to be Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and Benin. Nigeria and the ECOWAS countries go and intervene and bomb it with the French help and AFRICOM. And then they reinstate the old people in power. The coup failed, right? So Nigeria has been that kind of functional role. When it comes to the bombing that took place on Christmas, 24th of, if you're the Catholic Christmas, not the Eastern Orthodox one, on the 24th of December, one cannot deny that there is some antagonism happening between the Muslim population and Christian population. And this has long history in Nigeria, because even the Biafra separatist movement in the 70s and 60s was funded by the Zionists to create a division in Nigeria, which is stifled. So, and I don't think bombing solves anything, and I don't think that the Boko Haram, who have been funded and supported by the US in the first place, are going to get destroyed by just bombing a country like that. I mean, if it was like bombing countries, I think there's so many countries that worth bombing that are actually, well, the people are going to survive, where, let's go bomb Salvador, how about the people there? Let's go bomb Argentina, that just 2 days ago, Javier Milei was cutting welfare aid such that the people who are 80 years old have to go back to work, right? And then now they're beating up in the streets. So all of that, it's just this idea of bombing is a solution. I don't know how people in Nigeria are accepting it. And unfortunately, some of the Nigerian colleagues here in this university, when I speak to them, they were like, oh, yeah, we're fighting terrorism. But I mean, when has bombing really solved anything? Those are my takes. So Nigeria has been allowing the expansion of AFRICOM and intervention, not just in Nigeria, but in the region, and stifling potential this African unity that a lot of Africans are aspiring for.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for the time. I definitely will be circling back, and once your defense is done and you're able to publicize your dissertation, we definitely will have to do another dive in on all the things. I want to hear the rest of these stories, because I can only imagine some of the fascinating stuff that you encountered as this was happening. I'm trying to let me double check in my notes. I just want people also to be mindful, like sanctions did not start yesterday. Sanctions are an ongoing process. They've been ongoing forever. Sanctions against Iran started in 1979 under Carter. And the goal is always to starve. I think in part, let me not say the total goal, but I think in part, and you touched upon this a little bit, the goal is to get the people to be so angry with what is happening that there's room to create chaos. Right. And so when I look at what's happening now, but like what happened with Venezuela, and us, like the US, like literally like stealing presidents from out of their beds in the middle of the night, and how part of that was to continue the chokehold on Cuba, and the role that all of these things are playing when you consider how these sanctions and how the choking of the and the resources result in these types of things. And I'm very curious as this is going, and we'll need to, maybe so I might have to ping Professor Campbell again, but I'm very curious about what's happening now in the Caribbean countries, because there's a lot of discourse and conversation about how Cuba has always been a support to the Caribbean nations, right? They've always sent doctors. They've always supported where they could. And now is the time where there should be some solidarity, right? Where there should be some effort of the leadership in the Caribbean countries to work towards trying to do something and trying to get that needed support to Cuba. And it's very disappointing to see people basically fold to the whims of the U.S. demands. But I see the note to read Pampazuka. You want to tell people very quickly, and I'll drop this in with all the links into the chat.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you and for your audience for your kind words. Just like you wrote me, feel free to share my email address with people as well, Renee, if they're interested in talking further. But please do read Pambazuka News and Black Agenda Report, not because I write frequently for them. Even when I'm not, I took almost 7-month, 8-month period, I still read them because they're very, very important to understand the moment that we're in, politically speaking. If you're confused about any country, they probably have written about it, about any conflict from the Korean elections that took place to what's going on in Cuba. Those are your outlets. And just yesterday, we published Pambazuka News, a special issue on a title called The Debt We Owe Cuba. And I think Renee just spoke about that because Angola wouldn't be liberated if it wasn't for Cuba. South Africa wouldn't be liberated if it wasn't for Cuba. And so many countries in the global south would not have the health services that they are offering their citizens today if it wasn't for Cuba. So, and then obviously because of the neo-colonial education systems that exist, many of them, they don't recognize that history. And so a lot of the youth who are my age and even younger or even older a bit, they don't know what Cuba did and sacrificed from their economy, from their own population, from their people's bodies and limbs, for the liberation of Africa. So we should stand in solidarity with Cuba by all means we can. And if you live in a community where people know about Cuba or they don't, just tell them to read about it from this special issue, organize fundraising with whatever capacity that you have to send aid to the people. They need help with some over-the-counter drugs. They need help with power generators. They need help with everything, especially at this moment. Also, the change of public opinion, which is the key thing that the political leadership is afraid of. So yeah, Cuba is very dear to all of us. Thanks for that.
Thank you. All right, so Jared got booted. And, as people know, I am not good with the button pushing. He's back there. So hopefully when we close out, this all works itself out. I did promise folks that I would drop the link in the chat for the conversation that Jared and I hopefully will be having later because his computer will be working. And this is through the National Black Caucus of the Green Party. We'll be talking about why Malcolm's speeches are still relevant. So please, if you can, tonight at 7 p.m., tune in for that. As Jared mentioned, he's going to do his live tomorrow, which is only for Patreon folks. So those of you who are not, you might want to consider getting on that. Shout out to Cindy the Skull. Thank you so much for the gifted membership. I actually have no idea how these work. So hopefully someone was able to get this. I don't know how this works. Look into it. Also, shout out to Old Grease for the $2. Yes, same. I also hate Nicki Minaj. Sorry. I'm so sick of all these people. Nothing but chaos. If everybody just listened to folks like Essam, life would be a lot easier. That's my theory on things. So I will close out. Essam, thank you so much for the time and for the energy and the information. This was really, as always, as I expected, this was really what I anticipated you would bring. And so I really, really, really appreciate it. And then I think that's it, everybody. Peace, as Jared always says, only if you're willing to fight for it. And Jared, hopefully you can push a button.
With Renee.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.